Making your training session interactive is more than cheesy role plays and pop quizzes. Making your training session interactive is about creating a space where people can actually experience the learning in action. In this video, I'll introduce you to the concept of experiential learning so that interactive activities and experience get baked into your workshop or training session design. Plus, we're going to walk through an actual experience so you know what it feels like in action. Hi, I'm Kerri Price. I'm the founder of the Facilitators Network, and I use the concept of deliberate generosity to make sure that no meeting or workshop is ever wasted. I've been facilitating for 20 odd years, and in that time I've led thousands of meetings and workshops, community conversations. Nowadays, I help other trainers and facilitators to lead those sessions well. Albert Einstein once said, "Knowledge is experience, and everything else is just information." So in other words, you can tell people a bunch of stuff and they still don't really know it until they get a chance to experience it. Think about it for a minute. Let's say you had two people and they needed to learn how to drive from point A to point B without using a map. They needed to be able to remember all of the directions. Let's say one person was sat in a room with some pop quizzes, some maps they needed to colour in, some landmarks they needed to perhaps recognise, and some repetitive rote learning about turn left, turn right, straight ahead, whatever it might be. And then the other participant was given a chance to get in the car with an instructor and drive the route a few times, backwards and forwards, stopping a few times along the way to make notes about different things that have popped up. Imagine 2 hours into that, who do you think has the best chance of being able to drive the route without any mistakes? My money's on the one who got to experience it rather than just fill in some workbook or answer some pop quizzes. And that's the theory of experiential learning, giving people a chance to experience something as they learn. Now, I know what you're thinking. There are some things that people can do, like learn how to drive the car or memorize the route, but what about things like leadership skills or communication skills or collaboration? How can we get people to experience the principles of those things without cheesy role plays? That's what experiential learning is all about. So what is experiential learning? Well, traditional learning says, I'm the expert. I'm going to give you some frameworks or some processes, and you're going to learn all of the theory, and then you'll get a chance to put it into practice. Experiential learning says, hey, I'm going to throw something at you. We're going to take part in an activity, and then we're going to stop and notice what happened. We're going to reflect on what we noticed. We're going to conceptualize it and decide how that might look like in a real life scenario, and then think about how we would apply it and embed that into our own practices. And the thing about experiential learning is that it's not role playing. It could be really silly activities that just uncover key principles. And I want to give you an example of what I mean. In a minute, I'm going to walk you through an experiential activity just as I would as if you and I were in the same room. So it would be really nice if you played along at home, and I'll use the power of telepathy to try and guess what you've drawn. So this activity I often use before a group discussion or when I'm wanting people to think a little bit creatively. And I'll sometimes frame it up by saying, in a minute, we're going to have a discussion about XYZ. But before we do that, I need you to create some resources for me. So in a minute, I'd love for you to grab yourself a Post-it note, something like this, or a piece of paper. And I just want you to quickly draw me a dog. Now, it doesn't need to be gallery worthy. We're not hanging it up anywhere. It can be as primitive as you like. Just draw something that looks like a dog. That's step one. Once you've drawn a dog, the next step is to peel off your Post-it note and draw me a cat. Again, doesn't have to be gallery worthy. Just draw something that somewhat resembles a cat. And third, now it's time to draw a mouse. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you've played along at home and you've drawn me 3 pictures of a dog, a cat, and a mouse. Now, if I was in a workshop or a training session now, I would start by inviting everyone to hold up their pictures of a dog. And you'll get various versions of something like this: 4 legs, a tail, an ear. Sometimes you've got some real artists in the mix, but it actually doesn't matter. We have dogs. Then, in a workshop, I'll invite everyone to hold up their pictures of a cat. You'll end up with a whole bunch of pictures that look something like this: ears, whiskers, a little nose. Some of them are artistic. Doesn't really matter, just looks like a cat. Finally, I'll invite people to hold up their third post-it note, which is a picture of a mouse. And what's really interesting about this is almost always, in fact, I can't remember a time where it didn't work, everyone in the room draws a picture of something that resembles a little furry creature with a tail, 4 legs, whiskers, and ears. A mouse. But I wonder what would have happened if I invited you to draw a laptop, a keyboard, and then a mouse. Chances are you would have drawn something that looked a little bit more like a computer mouse than a little furry creature. And that's experiential learning, giving people an activity that creates an insight. But it's not my job to create the insight. It's my job to ask, what did you notice? And in this particular case, what people notice is that we are caught into a particular chain or train of thinking. So if we talk about dog, cat, mouse, we're instantly thinking animals. If we're thinking laptop, keyboard, mouse, we're instantly thinking computer equipment. So I use that to frame up conversations as to how we might bring our thinking to the room. Now, why I chose to use this particular experiential activity for this video is it illustrates how often we think about workshop design as trainers. When we go into how do we make our workshop more engaging, we instantly think role plays, pop quizzes, move around the room. But that's because we've been programmed in a particular way of thinking. This video is about inviting you to think outside of that and doing things a little bit differently. If you want to be able to include experiential learning in your workshops, you're going to need a toolkit of experiential activities you can actually use. So head over to my website where you can download this free resource. It's a book of 45 activities that build connection and spark conversation in a group setting. You can download that and a whole bunch of other free resources for free. The link is in the description below.